you get in?
Well, it's not going to Minty. I'm waiting.
Huh. Is anybody else having a problem? Howdy. All right. Well, good evening and welcome to All People's Church. This is Elba, Engaged Learning of the Bible with Application. I'm your host, Gabriel Miller. Before we get started this evening, I would like to call Josh Stone up to the platform. I did not have this ready for him last time. I was in my other car and we took a different car. Sir, this is a gift certificate to Sport Clips for $27. It allows you to get a triple play haircut. Because last week, if you weren't here, Josh won our arm wrestling competition. He is the Samson of APC. Says to Josh Stone from Gabriel Miller, the message says, congrats, Samson. All right? All right. All right. Well, I hope everybody's doing well. Let's get started. If you haven't done so already, get into our Minty presentation and let's get our questions going for tonight. Tonight we have Judges 17 to 21. We're wrapping up the book of Judges. I think we have 4 questions tonight to get us started. The first question is, the vignettes in Judges 17 to 21 show that idolatry could infiltrate Israel just as much as it could their neighbors. Certain tribes have devastating histories. The story of Israel seems to always end with a note of hope, or all of the above. If you read Judges 17 to 21, do any of those or all of them sound familiar? $14 may be it. Let's do it. Most people, well, so we got all of the above. We've got some answers from every category, and most people are saying all of the above. So we'll find out in just a few minutes. Another question about Judges 17 to 21. The 2 vignettes of Judges 17 to 21 occur in the first generation after the conquest of the Promised Land by Joshua, in the final generation of the Judges, in between the stories of Samson and Samuel, or in Egypt. Now, you had to read carefully to get this one, but it is in there. There are some 2 pieces of information that lead us to this conclusion. 2 vignettes of Judges 17 to 21 occur in the first generation after the conquest of the Promised Land by Joshua, in the final generation of the Judges, in between the stories of Samson and Samuel, or in Egypt. Survey says, mixed bag. Mixed bag. A little bit of everything. Okay, so we're not quite sure about that. We will point that out as we go. I hope and pray. All right, third question. Which tribe looked for land outside its own allotment, committing violence and idolatry in the process? Which tribe looked for land outside its own allotment? In other words, the allotted territory that God had said, these are the tribes and their territories. and committed violence and idolatry in the process? Was it Gad, Benjamin, Dan, or Reuben? Slim majority are saying Dan. A few people say other things. And finally, tonight, at the end of the book, Israel was united. What united them? Was it an enemy invader? Atrocities committed by one tribe in particular? Disease? Or a charismatic leader? All right, and our survey says on that one, half of the people think it's atrocities committed by one tribe in particular, and then the other half are kind of split among the other answers. So, let's find out, shall we? Our topic, we have a couple of topics. I've said it here already in the questions. We have 2.5 vignettes in these chapters 17 through 21. I talked about the story of Abimelech in Judges chapter 9 as a vignette. In other words, we have these stories of the judges, such and such judge, such and such judge. Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and God raised up a judge. So the book of Judges is about these judges, right? But in between these stories, there's a couple of these non-judge stories that just happen to occur in the same time period. And so, like the story of Abimelech, we have I'm saying 2.5 vignettes. The first one, which has to do with Micah, the Levite, and the Danites. And then the second one, which has to do with a different Levite and the Benjaminites and what goes on with them. So we'll dig into the first one first, obviously. Before we get into these two stories, let me state that the time frame is a little surprising for the modern reader, because we are at the end of the book of Judges. We would expect that whatever story we're going to get happens when? After Samson, because that's what just happened in the previous chapter. But if you read closely the details, these stories are not chronological. They do not happen after Samson. And we have some details later on that we'll point out that show us that. But these stories, these two vignettes, take place actually in the first generation after Joshua. Very early in the period of the Judges. Okay? And again, when we get there, I'll point out what makes us say that. Okay, so the first topic, or the first vignette, is Micah, the Levite, and the Danites. Let's get into it. So there's this character, Micah, who's an Ephraimite. Now, this is not the prophet Micah with the book named after him. First of all, that's many hundreds of years later, okay? And secondly, this is a bad guy, all right? So Micah the Ephraimite stole 1,100 shekels of silver from his mother at the beginning of chapter 17. And we learned that she had put a curse on whoever had stole her 1,100 shekels of silver. Well, it was him. And so since a curse was put on that person, he got scared. And so he confessed, hey, it was me. And so the mother retracts the curse and instead offers a blessing. Blessed are you, son, for admitting to this thing. Good luck with that. But anyway, we need to point out that 1,100 shekels of silver is the exact same amount as what? The previous chapter, when Delilah was offered 1,100 shekels of silver by each of the leaders of the Philistines. It is not it's not a coincidence that the author shares this fact. The fact that it's 1,100 shekels of silver, Delilah, and 1,100 shekels of silver for Micah. The author is trying to get you to see that this character, Micah, is worse than the character Delilah. Because she was persuaded to betray Samson. First of all, she's a foreigner, and she's betraying Samson for this money. But this character, Micah, is not betraying. He's just out and out stealing it, and he's stealing it from his own mother, and he's an Israelite. So the 1,100 and 1,100, it's not like they made up the number, but the reason that the author points out this amount and puts it in the story is for us to be drawn to see that Micah is actually worse, if I can say it that way, worse than Delilah. Okay, it's the very previous chapter, by the way. Delilah is the previous chapter. Then the very next chapter is this character, Micah. Okay, so he steals the silver. He gives it back. She takes a portion of that silver and has two idols made. One of them is carved. One of them is molded. Okay. Okay, verse 5 of chapter 17 says this: Micah set up a shrine for the idol, and he made a sacred ephod and some household idols. Then he installed one of his sons as his personal priest. One of his sons as his personal priest. Why does he do that? Well, first of all, he sees a need for a priest. Come back to that in just a second. Along one day comes a Levite, and Micah grabs hold of it, well, doesn't grab hold of him, but interacts with this Levite, and he says, hey, Levite, this is perfect. I need a priest. You know, I made one of my sons my priest, but I really want a real priest. So I'm going to get this guy from the tribe of Levi, and will you be my personal priest? And I'll cover your room and board, and I'll give you some expenses and so forth. And so the Levite agrees. So the Levite is bought off. In other words, greed is in play there. But now Micah has his own personal priest that's not his son. Now, how about this idea of the priest? I want to point out that it was important. Somehow or other, they, and in particular Micah, knew that it was important to have a mediator. Later on, when the Danites come and they steal the Levite, they also knew that it was important to have a mediator. They wanted to have a mediator. I wonder why that is. Something, even though these are bad guys, they had the idea, I need a mediator. I need somebody between me and God. Okay. Chapter 18, the Danites come. So the tribe of Dan, right? The tribe of Dan had not done their job of clearing their territory. Their allotted territory, they did the worst job of the 12 tribes. They were supposed to go in and clear out their territory and dispense with the non-Israelites that were in their territory. Dan did not do a good job of that. And so they did not have their territory up and running and cleared out, and it wasn't a good place for them to live because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so they decide, I'm going to send out 5 spies to other lands for us to go find other lands that's not our territory. That's a great idea, right? And so we get this story here that is reminiscent of the 12 spies. In fact, it's almost like the anti-story. The 12 spies are sent into the promised land, right? And they're going into the right place for the right reason, and they come back with a bad report. At least 10 of them did. These spies are going into the wrong place for the wrong reason, and they come back with a good report. Hey, this little town of Laish is isolated. They don't have any allies. We can go up there and mop them up and have us a place. And so they come back with a good report of being able to go in and do this, even though it was an evil thing. Well, the 5 spies, as they're spying out this land, come across Micah and his Levite en route to Laish when they find this town that they're going to destroy. And so when they go back and report back to the tribe of Dan, they say, hey, this town of Laish is ripe for the pickings. We can go in there and take care of business, and it can be ours. And so they assemble 600 warriors, And they do just that. They go out and they destroy Laish. They have ungodly, vicious violence. I'm not doing a very good job of advancing my slides. Violent, destroy this town of Laish. And along the way, they stop at Micah's place again. And these 600 warriors rob Micah of his idols. So there's a little irony there of, at the beginning, Micah is the one who is the thief, and at the end, Micah is the one who is robbed. And so the Danites, these 600 warriors, they rob Micah of his idols, and they convince the Levite to be their priest. Hey, wouldn't you rather be a priest for 600 people rather than just one person? And we'll pay you too, by the way. And so he's bought off again. So this greedy Levite becomes their priest. Okay. In the end of chapter 18, it says that the Danites rebuilt their town, this town of Laish. They called it Dan, for themselves. They set up their idols, the ones they had robbed Micah from, and they install as priest none other than the grandson of Moses, the son of Gershom. Now, some translations will say the grandson of Manasseh. And apparently, some of the later scribes had decided to change the name to Manasseh so as to not desecrate the name of Moses. But you have Gershom, which is the son of Moses, and then this fella Jonathan, I think is his name, who is installed as the priest of the Danites there in this new town of Dan. So this is only 2 generations after Moses and only 1 generation after the conquest of the promised land by Joshua. And oh, by the way, the son of Gershom, the grandson of Moses, is not supposed to be a priest anyway, right? Because he's not from Aaron. The priesthood comes from Aaron, so he's not the right choice on several accounts. Okay, so that is the vignette of Micah and the Levite and the Danites. Then we get the second vignette, which is the sin and decimation and restoration of the tribe of Benjamin. It begins in chapter 19 with a different Levite, another Levite, but it's a different Levite. He's traveling in the southern region of Israel, and it's getting late. It's about to get dark. He and the people that he's traveling with are deciding, okay, where are we going to stop? You can tell by the way the story is written that it's a dangerous time. You don't just stop any old place, okay? You know that you're in danger, and so you keep moving. And so they have an opportunity to stop and lodge with the Jebusites, and this Levite says, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's move on and get to a place where we have brothers. Let's get to a place where we have Israelites, and specifically the tribe of Benjamin, the territory of Benjamin. And so they get to a town called Gibeah, which is in Benjamin. And now all of a sudden the story really begins to take a turn and sound a lot like the story of Lot and Sodom. They go to the town square to lodge, okay? And an old man comes along. He says, don't stay in this town square. Come with me. Stay with me. So they get with this old man and go to where he's lodging. And the townsmen of Gibeah come out and they say, knocking on the door and saying, hey, bring out this man that this newcomer, we want to have our way with him. So again, it sounds like the story of Lot. And the old man says, no, please don't do this evil thing. Here, you can have my daughter and you can have the Levite's concubine. Don't do this wicked thing to this man. And so they do. And they are very violent toward these 2 women. And in particular, the Levite's concubine, they are so violent with her that by the time she comes back at the end of the night, she just drops dead right on the doorstep. The Levite wakes to find her and obviously is furious. He cuts her body into 12 pieces and sends it, these 12 pieces, all around Israel to various parts. And Israel is united to say, who has done this atrocity? We need to come together and make this right. And so Israel assembles an armed force. They are united against these men of Gibeah. And so they're on the doorstep of Gibeah in chapter 20, ready to go to battle. And notice what it says here in chapter 20, verse 27. The Israelites went up seeking direction from the Lord. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant was in Bethel, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, grandson of Aaron, was the priest. The Israelites asked the Lord, should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again, or should we stop? The Lord said, go. Tomorrow I will hand them over to you. The grandson of Aaron. So again, this story is taking place in the second generation after Moses and Aaron, in the first generation after the conquest of the Promised Land by Joshua. This, even though it comes at the end of the book of Judges, it's actually one of the very first stories chronologically in the book. Okay, I skipped a part here. They went to Gibeah and they went to the Benjamin, and they sent message and said, hey, Benjamin, tribe of Benjamin, these men of Gibeah, they're no good. We need to get rid of them. And gave Benjamin an opportunity. There was an opportunity there for Benjamin to say, yeah, that's awful. They should not have done that. You do whatever you need to do. But Benjamin didn't do that. The tribe of Benjamin came to the defense of these evil men of Gibeah. And so there was a battle between Benjamin and the entire rest of Israel. And Israel wins in the end. And not only wins, but absolutely wipes out the entire tribe of Benjamin. Only 600 men escape and hide out for 4 months. 600 men are all that's left of the tribe of Benjamin. So in the last chapter of Judges, we get the half. I said there were 2.5 vignettes. We get sort of the epilogue to this particular story, where the Israelites come together and they say, okay, this is not good. Benjamin just got wiped out, so they're not going to get an inheritance. We need to make sure that Benjamin gets their inheritance. How are we going to do this? There's only 600 men. And so they decide that what they're going to do, they had already vowed to the Lord, we're not going to give our wives in marriage to the Benjaminites. So they devise a kind of a loophole. And they say, we're going to let these daughters go out at this festival and run out, and we'll allow the Benjamites to catch them, and whoever they catch, they can go off and marry. And then they can perpetuate, what's the word I used there? Repopulate the tribe of the line of Benjamin. Now that's a weird story to the modern ear as well. But the bottom line is the tribe of Benjamin was repopulated, and they had an inheritance, and they didn't lose it. And there's a ray of hope here, as with most stories of Israel. There's so much down and awful, and then there's always this ray of hope for the story of Israel, that there are better days ahead. And so the book of Judges final story has that element to it as well. All right, that pretty much covers 17 to 21 of the book of Judges. In other words, the entire book of Judges is now done. Okay, so that means it's exercise time. So our exercise tonight is going to be pretty easy. You don't really have to do anything other than pass some things around. It's more of a show and tell than anything. But let me grab a couple things here. So Micah's mother had how much of what? 1,100 shekels of silver. Okay, 1,100 shekels of silver is approximately 25 pounds. and she kept back part of that, so a large part of that silver. Actually, she only used 200 shekels of silver to make 2 idols. So 200 shekels of silver, making 2 idols, so 100 shekels of silver for each idol, right? So each idol, the two idols would have been about 2.5 pounds. Another point, and so I'm going to just pass this around. I'll give it to Samson first. Okay, you can get an idea of the weight of Micah's mom's, her total amount of silver, and then also the weight of the idol. Okay, you also get a sense of the weight of silver that was promised to Delilah. Not just one of those things, but probably 5 of those 25-pound dumbbells worth of weight of silver, because the five leaders of the 5 towns, it was probably 5 times 1,100 shekels of silver. I meant to mention this last week while they're passing this around. I meant to mention this last week, but Samson probably did not look like a muscle man. Okay? Think about it. What is the secret of your strength? And these Philistine leaders are paying all this money to learn the secret of Samson's strength. Well, if he's got 50-inch biceps, it's not a secret what his strength is, right? So he probably looked like a regular dude, and so it was a secret. Like, what's with this guy? And so they're paying Delilah this money to learn why he is so strong, because he doesn't look strong. Very likely he does not look like a muscle man. All right, so we'll let the exercise kind of play out here as we we'll just keep going, all right, with the second look, all right? Second look segment, the trouble with Dan. And let's start here with a passage from the book of Revelation. It says, "And I heard how many were marked with the seal of God. 144,000 were sealed from all the tribes of Israel. From Judah, 12,000. From Reuben, 12,000. Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, 12,000 each." So 12 tribes, 12,000 each. And you notice that conspicuously absent is the tribe of Dan. Now, the Bible does not say why, it does not say explicitly why Dan is left off here of the list here in Revelation. But the most commonly suggested reason is the idolatry of Dan. This story in particular that we covered, where they take Micah's idols and they set them up and so forth. The most commonly suggested reason. Remember, this story takes place, really it takes place at the beginning of Judges, even though it's at the end of the book. And which means that this is really probably the first incident of idolatry in this way. Now, a caveat to that, I mean, they had the golden calf, so it's not like there was never any idolatry in the history of Israel. But anyway, that's probably the most common suggestion of why Dan is left out. Now, I wanted to say something else here. Let me see if I... Well, maybe it'll come to me. Oh, yeah, right here it is. Remember in Judges chapter 2, verse 10, it said this: "After that generation," that's the generation of Joshua, "after that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel." So Judges chapter 2, immediately after the paragraph where it says Joshua died, it says, "After that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord." This is the generation we're talking about. where Micah and the Levite and the Danites, as well as the Benjaminites. It's that generation in the end of the book of Judges that is being referred to at the beginning of the book of Judges of the generation after Joshua. Okay, so again, the common suggestion is that it's the idolatry of Dan is why he's left out of this list. Maybe. But let's throw out something else here. In light of Pastor Jeff's series on Sunday night, where Yahweh, the Lord, has an inheritance for himself, which is the land, and he distributes the land to his people, to his son, to his people, to the Israelites, the 12 tribes. And each of those 12 tribes is supposed to go clear out that land for themselves, but more importantly, for the Lord. And now we learn that Dan doesn't do that. Is it possible that the real reason Dan is left off the list is because they refused to take their inheritance? So they did not inherit their allotted territory because they refused to do what they needed to do. They despised their inheritance. And inheritance seems to be a really big deal to God. And so if you're going to go despise your inheritance, then maybe you ain't got no inheritance. So perhaps that is a part reason, or even maybe a better reason. Again, the Bible doesn't say explicitly why Dan is left off of this list. But it reminds me of what Hebrews says about Esau. And it says this in Hebrews chapter 12, beginning in verse 16, lest there be, we're talking to us, do good, do right, so that you're not like this guy, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. It reminds me of he despised his birthright. He despised his birthright. He was cheated out of his blessing. When it came time for him to get what was supposed to come to him, he couldn't get it because he despised it. And so in the same way, Dan despises the tribe of Dan despises their birthright, and in Revelation they are not listed. Maybe. All right, let's go then to the personal practical application. And for this, I want to return to the end of chapter 17. And I skipped this part on purpose. When Micah says about his Levite, now I know the Lord will be good to me. Let's read a little bit at the end of chapter 17 of Judges. Micah said to him, the Levite, dwell with me and be a father and priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance. So the Levite went in. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as priest. Can you imagine the deception? This guy is a thief from his own mother. He's an idolater. He's led his own family into evil. He made one of his sons his own priest. And he has profaned a Levite in order to make him his own personal priest, which is not the biblical prescription for how priesthood is supposed to work. And now he says, now I know the Lord will be good to me. Hello. He should be saying, now I know the Lord will be bad to me. The deception is high level. Notice he has tiny bits of knowledge. He knows some things, and the sum of the things that he knows are true. You might say it this way: he knows a few verses from the Bible out of context. He knows he needs a mediator. He knows the Levites are the correct tribe for priestly duties. He knows there's a thing called an ephod, and that's what the priests use in their duties. He knows a priest has to be consecrated. And he weaves all this together in his mind, and it seems right to him in his own eyes that now I know the Lord will be good to me. How often do we see this today? I know I'm prophetic, and I heard the Lord speak to me to go out and start some program that will benefit fill in the blank people group. But you didn't check with any kind of accountability, and now you're off on your own without any cover and exposed. But I know it's biblical to hear the voice of God and obey, so now I know the Lord will be good to me. Or, I felt the Holy Spirit in worship. Or, I speak in tongues, but yet you're living in sin with no plan of ever overcoming it. But I know my gift is proof of my right standing with Him. I know my feelings and emotions I feel in worship are proof of my right standing with Him. So now I know the Lord will be good to me. Or, I love and respect people. People is a biblical concept. So I'm going to use everyone's preferred pronouns. Now I know the Lord will be good to me. It's very dangerous to take a few pieces of truth without the whole truth and weave them together in your own mind to something that seems right in your own eyes. And then turn around and say, I'm good with God. I can tell. Good luck with that. So as we wrap up the personal practical application, why don't you take a few minutes in your groups to discuss this, okay? What are some ways that people trick? I gave you a couple. But what are some ways in which people trick themselves into believing that they are in right standing with God when they are not? Discuss a little bit, see what you come up with. All right, how we doing? Sounds like we've had some fruitful conversations there. Anybody want to share something quick with the whole room? It's okay if you don't, but just thought I'd offer a quick. Okay, all right. Next week. No, not next week. Celebration of knowledge first. Next week is going to be what? Well, that too. It's going to be the book of Ruth. But anyway, we'll get to that after we do our questions, all right? Celebration of knowledge. If you want to grab the QR code again, give it just a second. I think we're going to do real well on this. All right, here we go. Question number 1, the vignettes in Judges 17:21 show that idolatry could infiltrate Israel just as much as it could their neighbors. Certain tribes have devastating histories. The story of Israel seems to always end with a note of hope. All of the above. %, say, well, 88% say all of the above. The correct answer is all of the above. We knew that the other, the people that are outside Israel have idolatry, but with the story of Dan, we learned that idolatry can come into the people of Israel as well. Certain tribes have devastating histories. 2 tribes in particular were what in this particular passage? Benjamin and Dan both had some troubling stories there, okay? The story of Israel seems to always end with a note of hope. Even though we had this decimated tribe, Benjamin, they're repopulated. There's a note of hope there. They're not lost forever, okay? That is a theme throughout the Old Testament. You get into the prophets, Israel, 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 and then, but there's something coming. All right? 2 vignettes of Judges 17:21 occur in the first generation after the conquest of the promised land by Joshua, in the final generation of the Judges, in between the stories of Samson and Samuel, or in Egypt. Even though it was at the end of the book, it was in the first generation after Joshua. The stories chronologically actually happen at the beginning of the Judges, even though it occurs, it's written in the end of the book. And then, which tribe looked for land outside its own allotment, committing violence and idolatry in the process? Gad, Benjamin, Dan, Reuben. %76% say Dan. Yeah, so we do have 2 stories of 2 tribes. One is Dan, one is Benjamin. The one where the tribe that goes outside of its territory to try to go find other land because they didn't do their job of getting their own land straightened out, that was Dan. The Benjaminites were the ones that came to the defense of the evil men of Gibeah. All right. At the end of the book, Israel was united. What united them? Was it an enemy invader, atrocities committed by one tribe in particular, a disease, or a charismatic leader? Kind of just said this, but there it is. Atrocities committed by which tribe in particular? Benjamin. Okay. And so the rest of Israel was united against them. Okay. Personal study goal, read the book of Ruth. It's the smallest book that we've come across so far. 4 chapters. Read the entire book. Read it in one sitting if you can. That'd be cool. And then you want to look at your quarterfinal round of Judges. I passed this out on last time. It's time for March Gladness. If you have been paying attention, March Madness has begun. The college basketball tournament. I don't know if anybody's watching any of that. I have not watched one single play. But anyway, it is March Madness time officially. But we are in March Gladness. And I passed out Promise Division brackets. If anyone needs one, I told you to bring them back. But anybody need one? Well, good for you. All right. Keep bringing these back. It'll take us about 4 weeks to get through this, okay? So we are in week 1 of voting. I don't think we need a ton of discussion, but I'll give you just a little bit. We're in the Promise Division. We're in the Judges Subdivision. So here we go. The first face-off is between Yair and Ivzan. Please take just a minute to discuss before we vote. All right, so Yair, 3 biblical references, 30 sons, 30 donkeys, judged Israel 22 years. Ibzan, 2 biblical references, 30 sons, 30 daughters, judged Israel 7 years. So it's up to you. Donkeys or daughters, and 22 years or 7 years, you know? But it is up to you. Take it away. Vote, Yair or Ibzan. Man, we got a lot of people, more people vote for this than they do for the questions. All right, here we go. 19 is the magic number. It's not magic. At school, I always talk about Baptist magic. It's Baptist magic. But anyway, 19 votes, so we're going to have a winner. Here we go. Yair is the winner. He judged for 22 years. The other fellow only judged 7 years. Get rid of that guy. All right. So Yair advances to face Gideon, the number 1 seed of the judges. All right. 12-7. All right. Next round of voting is Ehud versus Tolah, the 5 seed versus the 12 seed. Ehud versus Tolah. Take a second to discuss. Yes. I never thought about that. It is that scene. All right. Ehud, 10 biblical references, killed King Eglon, and the land had rest for 80 years. Come on, somebody. And then Tolah, 1 biblical reference, he judged Israel for 23 years. It's your turn to tell us who you like, Ehud or Tolah. Is that good? Valiant sons. Oh, I missed that. Oh, okay, all right, okay. Now, is that the same Tolah? Okay, all right, okay. Well, there you go. Maybe he's got a chance. All right, here we go. It's 20 people, so we could have a tie. Let's see. Ehud takes it 18-2. All right. Ehud advances to face Deborah. Next face-off is Abdon versus Shamgar. Abdon versus Shamgar. Discuss. All right. So Abdon is your number 7 seed. He's got 4 biblical references: 40 sons and 30 grandsons, 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel for 8 years. Shamgar, only 2 biblical references, but he has this very cool story of killing 600 Philistines with an ox goad. All right, so who shall it be? Abdon or Shamgar? Vote, please. People have already voted. Okay, let's see. Shamgar pulls the lone upset of the evening so far. 20-1. Okay. Shamgar advances to face Samson. Final face-off of the night is Othniel versus Elon. Discuss. All right, conversation has died down. Othniel, 7 biblical references. He won a war. He attacked Kirjath Sefer, and he got him a wife. Elon, 2 biblical references. Judge Israel for 10 years. Make your choice. Final choice of the evening. All right. One more gives us a sure tiebreaker, but maybe we won't have one. All right. Oh, there it is. 17-2. Othniel defeats Elon. Othniel advances to face Jephthah in round 2. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, your brackets for next week: Gideon versus Yair, Deborah versus Ehud, Samson versus Shamgar, and Jephthah versus Othniel. So take a look at those for next week, in addition to the book of Ruth. That is it for tonight. I hope you have a great week. I really love you guys.